The mayor's salary, as the committee recommended, is higher than the Blue Ribbon Commission. I think it's fair to represent our concern in the committee that we were feeling that the mayor's office deserved more. The department heads in some cases are paid more than that, and it's a position in this city of great responsibility, and the office deserves that. It's not a matter of trying to decide what any individual occupant of that office. And then finally, the tradition has always been, as much as possible, to have the school committee sort of be about 50% of the salary of the city council, and also it represents an increase to take account of inflation. So, and then one final point, there's been some concern expressed that there are collective bargaining agreements outstanding. Those collective bargaining agreements are between the mayor and the various unions. It's not a council responsibility. Our responsibility is to make a decision, if we are going to make a decision, by the deadline set by the ordinance.
It's been 20 years since the last raise. Honestly, for the last 17 years that I've been doing this job, spending about 20 to 25 hours a week doing this when I could have been making my hourly rate. The only way that I could justify this, we had young kids, and the only way I could justify it was the health insurance. Because every year I said, should I or shouldn't I? And that was one way I could justify it. So when we talk about a raise that really, we're not talking about getting back pay like the unions do. We're not talking about retroactive pay to 20 years ago. It's really just what the pay was then with the normal increases it would be. And my concern, and actually when I was reading through some documents that David Olson sent me from 1970-something, their concern was my concern now. And that is if we don't have a reasonable, and it's very minimal, a reasonable salary for councilors, the mayor, and school committee people, we will have only people with a lot of money and who don't need to think about compensation. So it even said it in the notes back then. They were concerned that it would only be elite people who would run for office. And I think that is the same thing now.
This is not a salary, it's a stipend. And it's a stipend that doesn't cover the sacrifice that I and Councilor Lappin and a number of other people in this room make, not just personally, but financially, in order to do this. I believe in public service. I'm fortunate that I'm able to take this kind of work on and not get paid for it. I think this might go from $2 an hour to $3 an hour if we pass this tonight. So to me, that's not pay.
I'm not going to be as articulate as my colleague from Ward 8. That was a wonderful speech. But I am also going to be consistent, and for many months now, I've been saying that I just won't support this. And it's not, frankly, based on the substance of the item, because this is a modest increase. As Councilor Baker said, it really keeps up with cost of living. For the mayor especially, frankly, it's probably low. In the private sector, someone with that level of responsibility, managing that budget, managing that staff count, would be paid much, much more. So I can appreciate all those points. I also understand how contract negotiations work. I get it. We're not the ones doing it. It's between the mayor and the teachers union and the school committee and the teachers union. However, there's also a symbolic element to this, and voters and residents do key off of what City Hall does as a monolithic entity. The Newton Public Schools are the beating heart of this city. The Newton Public educators are the beating heart of the schools. And I think for us to give ourselves a raise and to give the school committee a raise and to give the mayor a raise at a time when the teachers are falling behind their peers in the Commonwealth sends the wrong message about where education sits in the priorities of this city. And education is number one. So for that reason, I'm not going to support it. I hope it comes back to us in 2 years' time when the teachers union has a contract, and I hope I can support it then.
I have tremendous respect for the words that Councilor Auchincloss has just given. We do have unions who have not settled their contracts, And we need to do that as a city. However, one of the things that I want to bring up is it's an issue that's been settled, but it was an issue that was brought up and there was some contention over, and that is the healthcare issue. People like myself, I take healthcare, are largely self-employed. And you don't need to take healthcare if you work for a corporation, you work for an institution, you work for a university, you work for a large medical establishment. But if you have a family business or a small consulting business yourself, it will cost my family, for example, somewhere between $1,500 and $1,800 a month to pay for health insurance. And so I think that the health insurance decision, while it was essentially made for us. I think that it's only fair that those people who would be getting a lower salary if they were to take health insurance or would have to pay for their own health insurance, I think that it's only fair to include that in the salary for whoever feels that they need it.
In case it was on anybody's mind, I did inquire with the legal department about a potential conflict of interest of us taking these votes to increase our stipend, and was assured that because the authority to establish this ordinance rests solely with the City Council, that it doesn't present a conflict of interest. We don't need to file any disclosures or anything like that, but we are totally within our rights to vote on this ordinance. Secondly, I want to thank the Blue Ribbon Commission, who did a lot of great work and certainly helped us on the Programs and Services Committee as we were going through the information. I think they learned firsthand that public services is just that. They met several times and did a lot of good work, so I applaud them on their efforts. My concerns in committee were actually at one point articulated very well by, I believe, a member of the Blue Ribbon Commission, especially with regard to the mayor's compensation. Unlike the City Council and the school committee, the mayor is required to live in the city, but also this is required to be the full-time job, and the mayor's not allowed to have other employment. So in a city like Newton, where the cost of living is high, we're actually really limiting this position to someone who's probably not relying on the salary, or at least not independently relying on that salary to house their family here in Newton. And so one of my concerns was that the mayor's compensation was low. Another concern I had was that our work to bring the City Council compensation or the stipend, both for school committee and City Council, based on the CPI, got us almost there for today, but knowing the political nature of this question, it's probably going to be several years before we're able to revisit the topic, or the City Council is able to revisit the topic. So I was concerned that we were actually putting future City Councils in a difficult position, 4 or 6 years down the road, who would again be undercompensated without an ability to revisit the issue.
There is no good time to vote a raise for the City Council. In my first term on the council, we had a vote similar to this one, and I voted it down because it didn't seem like the right thing to do. At the time, the city was having difficulties. But having been on the City Council for 16 years, I know that there is no time to do this. There's always a problem, whether it's the teacher's contract or a downturn in the economy, whatever it is. There's no good time to vote this. The Blue Ribbon Commission did a survey of other city councils, and I was arguing that we ought to be at least at the midpoint. The midpoint was 19,000. We are not at the midpoint. We'll still be below the midpoint. So I think we're being, I'm not sure whether that's fair or not, but we are being frugal. Let's put it that way.